Welcome to the NBA Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyden. Monster Wednesday slate as usual. Fun slates. We got a lot to kind of break down here. A lot of injury news that we do need to keep an eye on. We got Anthony Davis doubtful for tonight's game. We're on Lillard watch once again, but probably more closer to being out tonight. So definitely one to keep an eye on here.
Yeah, and I think both of us are probable for the rest of this podcast, so that's something to note going forward. One of us could just randomly disappear, late scratch or something like that. So if you have us in your lineups, you might want to adjust accordingly.
I did have some connectivity issues during shoot around today, so that was a problem for me.
Yeah, it was. So that's something, again, just something of note going forward if you have us in your lineups.
Dallas Charlotte, this first one here first. 210 over under Charlotte by 7. Dallas on a back to back. I know you have a lot of interest in this Charlotte side, but we'll start here with Dallas. Some of these guys, I mean, not that appealing of spots here. I did talk to you before the show. Dennis Smith does have a little friends and family narrative tonight. 30 expected guest of his to be in the stadium. It's always fun when you get those.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. What is it? 3-4 for Dallas back to back, and they flew from Dallas to Charlotte last night after last night's game. So losing an hour of time and flying a bunch of miles, playing a team that's well rested. The Hornets haven't played since the 5th, so that's 4 or 5 nights off. So uh, not really interested in Dallas outside of Dennis Smith Jr. If you want to, attack the friends and family narrative. I mean, that is something, I guess. Charlotte really hasn't been great against point guards this season, 17th in defensive efficiency over the last 10. You could go there, I guess, if you really wanted to. But I'm not forcing into my lineups. The only real guy that I do maybe have a little bit of interest in would be Solid Measure, where he's cheap, just because you could see him get some extra run to battle with Dwight Howard down low.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Dallas for the most part on a full slate's pretty unintriguing. I mean, Dennis Smith, like he's shooting guard eligible on DK. I don't mind that at 6,100 where you can use him there, but that's about it for me.
Dallas on like a one game slate would be not intriguing at all. So
Don't if DraftKings is watching this, the one game slates they've already done it for football.
yeah, they might start doing it. But yeah, like it's just there's so many better spots to go with. Like you're not trying to force any of those guys.
Yeah. Talk Charlotte here, who are in a good spot, as you mentioned, well rested. Some of these guys, I mean, you mentioned you were listening to a couple of pods around the industry, kind of feeling that Charlotte was overpriced, but I don't mind paying these price tags for them.
Yeah, I get it. Like Kemba Walker's up to like 7,900 on DraftKings. I think he's over 8K on FanDuel. He's 8,400. He is priced up relative to what he was sitting at last week. He was down to like 6,600 just like 2 weeks ago, lower 7Ks a few days ago. Went up to 8.3 on in their last game against the Lakers. But excellent spot here. I wrote both him and Dwight Howard up in the GPP article. They're guys that I'm actually building around in my lineups here. Matchup against Dallas, they're 30th in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games against point guards. Struggle against the pick and roll. They don't have good rim protection. It's just a great spot for Kemba Walker, who should get back to playing regular minutes. Like his minutes have been down the past few games because of blowouts. You'd expect to see this back up to 35, 36, assuming this game stays close, which is obviously a little bit of concern. But I mean, if it does blow out, it's probably because Kemba and Dwight are having good games. So Kemba is definitely a guy that I absolutely love. And then Dwight Howard, like I mentioned, is pretty much just a lock for me, given the matchup against Dallas.
Yeah, I'm with you. Bad rebounding front court. Definitely like Howard. Dallas over the last 10 games, I mean, third most fantasy points allowed to point guards. So, yeah, Kemba's definitely in line. As far as secondary options on this team, like Batum, Lamb, Kaminsky, for me, I think there's better options on this slate.
Kaminsky is interesting given his price, especially on FanDuel at 4,800 in a power forward position that I don't absolutely love a lot of plays tonight. DraftKings as well, 4,400. He's kind of taken a lot of minutes away from Marvin Williams, who has been really bad recently. So I don't mind going there if you need a kind of a cheaper option. He's fine. Not really on Batum. Lamb coming off a stretch of really solid outings. You could see him getting some extra runs, so I don't hate that move right there. But that's pretty much it.
Utah, Washington, kind of another lackluster game to start this slate. But uh, on the Utah side here, I don't have a lot of interest. It's basically just John Wall on the other side. I know you're kind of feeling similar.
Yeah, it's basically Wall, and it's more of just a price play there. He's still just a little bit too cheap on DraftKings. Not a great matchup. Utah really slow pace, but their defense against point guards has really slipped as of late. So he's an interesting price play, but maybe Otto Porter a little bit interesting. That's pretty much it from Washington, and I don't really care about the Utah side of this unless you see Derek Favors sit, which he's listed as probable for this game.
Yeah, I think we can move on from this one. Miami, Indiana next year. Miami on the back-to-back. We obviously saw Goran Dragic go off last night. He's still 6,500. Obviously, played a ton of minutes. He's been playing heavy minutes of late. Are you going back to the well here at all?
If Tyler Johnson gets ruled out, I will be pretty much all in on Goran Dragic. Not the greatest of matchups. We've seen Indiana actually kind of clamp down on defense against point guards as of late. They're one of the best teams over the last 10 games. They rank third in defensive efficiency against the position, but it's really tough to overlook the usage. I mean, 34% usage prior to last night's game. Whenever I pulled that number, I don't have it after that game, but saw him go for over 50 fantasy points without Tyler Johnson in the lineup. It is a back-to-back with travel, so that is concerning. Obviously, a spot where you could see Miami come out and kind of struggle, but it would be tough to overlook him at that price if Tyler Johnson were to sit.
Yeah, I think if he was maybe, another thousand or, even 700, 800 more, like I'd be a little bit more worrisome. But at that price, I mean, I still think like you kind of look at his previous games, like against Utah, he scored 29, New York, he scored 34, like not great games, but I think that's kind of what the floor you're looking at here.
Yeah, it really is, and at that price, like that's a fairly safe floor, especially in cash games. Obviously, in GPPs, you could easily fade him, given that you would expect his ownership to be pretty high coming off. I mean, he's got 250 fantasy point outings in his last 4 games, and again, with the usage with no Tyler Johnson in the lineup, you would expect him to probably carry some ownership. So in tournaments, it's a fine fade. I think he's definitely a good cash game option though.
So other options on the Heat here, I mean, all kind of in this same price range. Kelly Olynyk 5,900, he's getting some run. Hassan Whiteside under 7K. His minutes just really haven't been there. Like it wouldn't surprise me if he goes for about 30, 35 fantasy points, but I don't know if we're going to get anything more out of him at this point. Even it's a really good spot.
Yeah, it really is. It's a great spot here for him. Obviously, one game against Indiana earlier this season, 15.7 rebounds in only 22 minutes. We know we like to target big men against Indiana. They're a terrible rebounding team, no interior defense at all, giving up a ton of points in the paint and second chance points. So it is a spot where, in theory, Hassan Whiteside should go off. Price is 6,800 on DraftKings. I like that price there. What is he on FanDuel? Let's see. He is 76. Yeah, I'm not paying that price on FanDuel, but I would definitely go there on DraftKings in tournaments, not in cash games, unless we get like a James Johnson suspension, which is always a possibility given that him and Ibaka were throwing punches last night. But Miami's just I don't know. I can't get the thought out of my head that they're just going to come out and just lay a absolute dud here.
I think that's why I'm not going after the Wayne Ellington, the Adebayo here. Like I just don't want to go into this Miami team. Like it's a full slate. There's so many other options and better games and better fast paced matchups.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily mind either one of those guys. Like, I wouldn't mind going with Adebayo if we saw James Johnson miss this game. Wayne Ellington's okay if Tyler Johnson misses, and Derek Jones is also an interesting option if you see uh, if Tyler Johnson sits this game out, with Derek Jones being minimum salary, you might expect him to get a few extra minutes. So he's fine if you need that value option on a slate where there's not a ton of great value right now. But I'm just not terribly intrigued with this Miami side of this game, and unless news falls right, like if Johnson and if Johnson and Johnson are both out, I would have a little more interest.
Yep. On the Indy side here, Miles Turner is questionable for tonight's game. Obviously, if he sits out, that's going to take a few extra minutes over to Sabonis, who, we've been through this before this year, where we've seen Sabonis whether he starts, whether he's on the bench, like he's playing really well. The usage has dropped a little bit when he does enter the lineup, but his production goes up.
Yeah, I think some of that comes from the rebounding. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know he does. His rebounding rate does increase when he's in that starting lineup. His price where it's at, especially on DraftKings, I don't want to go there in tournaments. He's an excellent cash game option. But I mean, going back to whenever he was the mega chalk prior, whenever Turner was sitting out earlier this season, like I was always fading him in tournaments, and I'm still going to do that. This is a spot where you could see him flopping up against Whiteside. At the same time, you could also see this being a spot where Miami plays small because Sabonis isn't really a traditional center. So, again, excellent cash game option. Probably a good fade in tournaments, but all around, he's a decent play.
Yeah, I don't mind him. You can take a look at Victor Oladipo tonight, 8,800. I don't mind going. Like he's basically the only other indie guy that I feel comfortable even using on this slate.
Yeah, I like him a fair amount here. Price is starting to climb. I mean, he's up to almost 10K on FanDuel. That's a little bit insane. You're still looking at a guy with a fairly safe floor in this matchup. And if this game does get out of control, it's probably because Oladipo is going off.
Yeah, we saw that the other night against Chicago, where they put a good pounding to him, and he had 50 points in 24 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, that's what you would expect if this game gets out of hand. You're hoping for a 50 fantasy point outing from Depot and limited minutes, but he's a fine option. Like I especially like him in cash games because you're feeling pretty safe with that price.
Yep. As far as anyone else here, though, like Darren Collison, Thaddeus Young, Lance Stevenson, Bogdanovich, not really in play for me here.
Dad's interesting if Turner sits, just because of the price, and we've seen Miami struggle against power forwards of late. They rank 17th in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games, so he's a decent cheap option.
Anyone else want to talk about from this one?
Nah.
Chicago, New York here, 208 total. This is a game I think with a little bit more to offer. Starting with the Chicago side, Chris Dunn, price came up a little bit from that last time, so you don't get the bargain that he was going up against the Rockets. But once again, like he's a guy that I've been playing a ton of, especially of late. No problem going back to the well here. He's played well against New York in 2 games this year, averaging 40 fantasy points. We know New York struggles against point guards. He's going to be a guy that I kind of look to build around tonight.
Yeah, same here. And we did get news Mirotic is now doubtful for this game. So that's just a bigger boost for Dunn. Without Mirotic on the floor, Dunn with almost 27% usage rate, 1.15 fantasy points per minute. He becomes a guy that I am actively trying to force in my lineups. Going up against a Knicks team. Again, you mentioned they struggle against point guards. They rank 25th in fantasy points allowed, 47.56 per game. Really no reason to fade him. A really high ceiling in this matchup, safe floor, just a great option all around.
Definitely. You going with Justin Holiday, Denzel Valentine here, some of the other shooters.
No, probably not. I don't have an issue with Valentine just because he's still pretty cheap. Don't really want to go with Holiday here. I get it with the minutes. It does make him an interesting option, especially in cash games, given the amount of minutes he's playing, but not really intrigued by him. I don't mind taking a shot on Bobby Portis here without Mirotic. Obviously, his usage and production goes up, but I don't necessarily like targeting the front courts of the Knicks.
No, I don't either. Obviously, I think the rebounding rate goes down when you're going up against the Knicks, but if he's going to shoot 17 times here, if he's obviously been a guy who will go out and shuck. Like I'm going to look, and he's still really cheap. He's only 4,700 on DK. Like for me, Markkanen's a decent option for me. Like I don't mind using him as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. Like you mentioned, Porter shooting 17 times against Houston. That's pretty insane. Again, the Knicks interior defense extremely good. They rank 4th in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games against power forwards. Again, limiting opponent rebounds because you do have Enes Kanter, who is an excellent rebounder in there. Don't see a lot of upside here, but it is really tough to ignore the usage and production at that price for Portis. Markkanen, I don't really. I would rather take the shot on Portis, who's significantly cheaper than Markkanen.
Yeah, 1,200 cheaper. Um, that's about it for the Bulls team. Anyone else here?
Robin Lopez is cheap, 4,100 on FanDuel. He's cheap on DraftKings as well. It is a revenge game for Lopez and Holiday, I guess. So there is that.
On the Knicks side, we'll start with Porzingis here. He's a guy who, we talked a little bit before the show about, struggling with, stamina right now. He's having an issue. We were joking around. It's the supermodels in New York. Like it's a big game, man. It's you gotta be able to handle both here.
Yeah, I mean, if he's struggling with stamina, someone should tell him they have pills for that.
Yeah, that was kind of a poor word choice by my end. But I mean, he has come out and said that he is tired. He's averaging 36 minutes over his last 5 games. He's taking a ton of shots. He's continuing to not shoot well, but produce decent fantasy point outings. I don't mind taking some shots like here. I don't mind him at 8,300. He has some upside. The block shots have been there. If he can kind of put a game where he gets a little bit everything together and puts up 25 with a couple of blocks, like he's going to be a 45, 50 fantasy point guy. And in this matchup, it's a good spot for him.
Yeah, I've kind of always been like, as of late at least, been of the thought that Porzingis is a great tournament option because he's gonna have one of these games eventually where he goes out and puts up like 60 fantasy points. Given his recent performances and just the fact that he isn't in the greatest of matchups, I don't know that you want to use him in cash games. There's just so many better options, especially in that price range. But excellent tournament option. I do like him a little bit more if Beasley sits, just because the minutes are a little bit more secure as far as him being on the court, and as far as the shooting goes, like he's gonna take extra shots with no Beasley there.
If Beasley comes in, you interested?
Of course, I'm always going to be interested in Beasley. I mean, he's been the guy that's kind of had to carry the offense whenever Porzingis has struggled. He comes into the game, plays like 25 minutes, jacks up like 15 shots, and pulls down like 8, 10 rebounds. So he's a guy that you could definitely look at if he suits up.
Yep. Kind of moving to the backcourt. It's been obviously pretty split between Akina and Jarrett Jack. Both are really cheap, both in obviously good spots. I hate Jack so much, but I mean, he's averaging 25 fantasy points over the last 5 games. Minutes have been there, but we've also seen Okene play as well too. Like he's averaging 22 minutes over his last 5, 25 minutes in each of the last 2. Like, and he has that peripheral stat upside. Like the assists and steals are there as well.
Yeah, I do like Ntilikina here. I'm not going to go with Jarrett Jack. I think if you're taking a shot at point guard on with either one of these guys, you're looking at Ntilikina. I think he has plenty of upside in this matchup against a Bulls team where over the past couple games, was it against the Raptors and the Mavericks, we saw backup point guards just kind of torch them. So Ntilikina is definitely an interesting option. I think my favorite option from the backcourt is going to be Courtney Lee, and he's just that guy that you know is going to get a bunch of minutes, double-digit field goal attempts in 3 of his last 4. Uh, he's a safe option here at 5,100 on DraftKings, and he's let's see, 6K on FanDuel. I'd probably fade over there, but I do like him a lot on DraftKings.
Yeah, but don't mind him. He's averaged 20 fantasy points in 2 games against Chicago this year. Like you said, the minutes are going to be there. So I'm with you. Anyone else from this New York team?
Kylo Quinn's interesting. If Beasley sits, you're obviously probably going to get some game log chasers with coming off a big game against the Mavericks, but he's a guy that you could look at if you need a lower priced option. He's center eligible on FanDuel. I don't know that I would do that, but power forward center on DraftKings. He's a guy you could look at 4,100.
And you and I both, we're kind of in Cantor too expensive on this slate.
Yeah, plenty of upside. It's not the greatest of matchups, but you could go there if you wanted to. He's 6,200 on DraftKings. Like if I just do a quick look at guys in that same price range, I'd rather have Trey Lyles. I'd rather have Sabonis, Biombo, and some of these other guys that we're going to get to later.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing. Like he's cheaper on FanDuel. He's 54, but Biombo's 200 more. Steven Adams is only 900 more. So I kind of rather go there.
Yeah, same here.
Detroit and Brooklyn. I guess I kind of owe an apology to Avery Bradley. Hell, no, I don't. He screwed me so many times this year, but finally broke out against New Orleans.
Yeah, and it's again a spot where you would expect him to break out. You're not going to hear that he's on a never play list for many one of us. I hate when people say that. It's so annoying, but um, he has been just really, really bad for a majority of the season, but coming off an excellent outing, you would expect if this game stays close, the minutes are going to be there. He has 28% usage without Reggie Jackson on the floor. It's a great spot against Brooklyn. They play fast, they turn the ball over, they give up a bunch of 3-pointers. He's still cheap. Like, I don't really see a reason why you should fade him here unless you can't get the fact unless you can't just get over the fact that he's burned people so many times before. But I mean, we've seen the upside, so 5,400, I'll take that shot, and he's even cheaper on FanDuel if I recall correctly. He is 4,900. Like, I absolutely love that price for him on FanDuel.
This is going to be the night where everyone hops back on. He just drops a dud.
Probably, and then everyone's like, I'm never playing Avery Bradley again, and then the next game he goes off again.
That's how it goes. There's a lot of options on this Detroit side. Ish Smith, I don't mind. I feel like people just continue to kind of gripe about his price. Like, I know on FanDuel, he's a little bit more expensive. He's up to 6,600. Like, he's $100 more than Dragic. He's the same price as Jamal Murray, so I think FanDuel is a little bit off play. But 5,700 on DK, like, he's a decent cash game option. I'll look elsewhere in GPPs though.
And like I think people aren't realizing like he's been fairly solid. Like, I know against New Orleans, not the greatest production, 28.5 fantasy points, but at 5,700, like, you'll take that in cash games. Put up 30 against Houston and only play 26 minutes. 26 minutes against Philly, 19.5. That was a blowout. Miami, not the greatest of outings. San Antonio, decent outing. He had kind of his upside game against Orlando the first time he started in place of Reggie, put up almost 38 fantasy points. I think we're looking at a similar performance here against a Brooklyn team that not great against point guards on the season. They've been a little better recently, but still not that great. They do struggle against pick and roll ball handlers. You could see Ish and Drummond kind of running that 2-man pick and roll over and over and over and over and over and over again tonight against a weak Brooklyn defense. So I think he's usable in all formats on DraftKings. FanDuel, I think you just look at him in cash games.
Tobias Harris, obviously a great spot for him tonight. Price has come up a little bit, but he's been fantastic. At that price, especially at small forward, I'm going to be using quite a bit of him here.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't go too in depth about Tobias Harris because everyone knows I have this obsession with using him pretty much every single night. So I did write him up in the GPP article. A great spot for him. Back-to-back games over 40 fantasy points. Usage is there for him. Production is there for him without Reggie Jackson. He's been like the stable part of this team for the entire season. I absolutely love him in the spot. Like, I'm not fading him here.
And he's 6,700 over on FanDuel. Like, that's a really nice price tag in comparison to power forward, where I think just kind of in that range, like, you have Trey Lyles at 6'4". And obviously you have Sabonis who's 5'9". Like, FanDuel, that kind of range of power forwards is where I'm going to be looking mostly.
Yeah, same here. Like, he's a guy that, especially at power forward on FanDuel, you're definitely considering. And again, it's just a great spot for him. Like, don't overthink it here. If you have 6,900 left over on DraftKings for your forward or utility spot, I think he's the guy that you just kind of plug in and move on.
Andre Drummond, obviously interesting because last year he was just a different player, didn't play well against Brooklyn. Obviously, he was just kind of a guy who was fizzled out of rotations at times. I'm kind of thrown out the window, of his previous matchups. Like, I don't mind going with Drummond here tonight.
My case for Drummond is this: without Reggie Jackson on the floor, 1.41 fantasy points per minute. There you
go. I mean, it's hard. Like, this is such a great spot for him.
It really is. It is really tough, though, because you have Dwight, who's kind of similarly priced. You have Towns, you have Cousins, Jokic, all these other guys that we're going to get to. I think Drummond is going to be overlooked here, and he probably shouldn't. He's better on the road. Detroit's not that great on the road, which is a little concerning, but it's a spot where you could see him put up like a 20, 18-6 game, or be on that triple double watch or something like that, and you're going to regret fading him.
Anyone else you're looking at here?
No, I will say this on FanDuel: if you're playing that all utility game, like, building an all center lineup is a very viable option tonight. It's an option that I might actually go with because it's rather interesting over there. But yeah, that's pretty much it from the Detroit side of things, unless you want to try to go with Dwight Bikes again. I wouldn't say no if you need a value play.
And on the Brooklyn side, I mean, obviously we saw a lot of these guys, I was kind of lukewarm about last time out, play really well in the overtime game, and they were playing well before the overtime even came. Obviously had day off here to recover. I don't mind using some of these guys. We've seen Detroit, as you mentioned, play poorly on the road, and I don't think a lot of people are going to be looking to attack Brooklyn on a full slate.
No, I don't think they will. I think Dinwiddie's the interesting option here, going up against a Detroit team 25th in defensive efficiency over their last 10 games. They really struggle to defend in isolation, and Dinwiddie is one of the better isolation players on this team. We saw him kind of turn it on in the second half of that last game. I do like him a lot here, and his price is extremely fair across the industry. So he's a guy that I would really look at here. We're waiting on injury news for this game. Let's see. Stauskas is questionable. Carroll is out. Alan Crabb is doubtful. That's going to open up a lot of usage here. Dinwiddie 21.6% usage, 1.04 fantasy points per minute with those guys off the floor. I do like him a lot here in this spot. And then you're kind of looking at the other guys like Karis LeVert coming off a bad game. He's in an interesting spot. I would have some interest in him with almost 26% usage with those guys off the floor. As far as the backcourt goes, those are the two guys I'm looking at the most.
Yeah, I don't mind it. Outside of that, though, it's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, you're going to see minutes for Joe Harris, assuming Alan Crabb sits. He's a fine value option. Milton Doyle will start to get some extra minutes. I'm not going there. Stauskas, if he plays, might get a few extra minutes. I'm not going there. It's Karis LeVert and Dinwiddie for the most part.
New Orleans and Memphis here next. This is a game that's, probably spend a little bit extra time here talking about because Anthony Davis is on the doubtful side tonight. Watch him completely just flip and play tonight.
Probably. Oh, I should mention I do really like Rondae Hollis Jefferson.
Yeah, don't mind him. It's still fairly priced on DK. He's 6,600.
Yeah,
don't mind it.
Not the greatest of matchups, but a good spot for him. But yeah, you mentioned Anthony Davis. I have nightmares of him being ruled in 5 minutes after lock.
I would not be shocked. I kind of it will anticipate that possibly happening.
It might, who knows? But it's Anthony Davis, so he'll get rolled in and then he'll go to the locker room after playing 9 minutes of actual game time. But without him on the floor, everybody knows DeMarcus Cousins is an excellent play, extremely high usage rate, excellent production without Anthony Davis on the floor. Not the greatest of matchups, but he's going to be the chalkiest player on the slate in cash games, I think, as far as the studs go. You and I were talking about it prior to hopping on this recording. I think in 2 of the games he played without Anthony Davis this season, he had 80 plus fantasy points, and the rest he just kind of hovered in that 50, 55 range. I'm okay fading him in tournaments. I think it's actually an excellent option to fade him in tournaments. In cash games, even though it's a terrible matchup, you're just kind of building around him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind going with him. He's priced up a little bit, obviously because of this news, but like I said, cash games, I don't mind building around him. On a full slate, there's so many options I can go with too. And we've, rattled off a couple of centers. We, haven't gotten to Jokic yet. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind cash games. I think GPPs, you can get a share or two, but I'm with you in terms of, looking other directions. I know your interest obviously lies with Drew Holiday, who you put in your GPP article today, who, his production has been excellent. And it was funny to note that just him and Eatful Moore just shooting 60%. It's just insane. Those numbers. I mean, over the, the 4 or 5 games that Davis has sat out, it's just 6,900 for Holiday. I don't mind even using more, at 4,600 at small forward. You look at Memphis, I mean, they've been kind of right in that middle, between 13 and 16 in terms of defensive efficiency this year against shooting guards and small forwards, where it's not a great spot, but it's not the worst spot in the world either.
Yeah, I should mention with Cousins, going back real quick, turnover is still a huge concern for him, and especially with the increased usage he's going to have with no Anthony Davis. that is concerning, especially on FanDuel, and makes it an easier fade. But you mentioned Holiday, 44 fantasy points per game without Anthony Davis on the floor this season. It's a 5 game sample size. Etuan Moore is right around 30 fantasy points per game without Anthony Davis. If you're fading Cousins and you're still wanting to get exposure to this game, I think both of those guys are interesting options. Obviously, not the greatest of matchups for either one of them going up against Memphis. I will say this, though. Memphis has struggled recently over the last 10 games, 29th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards. We know Drew Holiday starting at the shooting guard position, playing off the ball a lot. I absolutely love him in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, minutes are going to be there. He's been playing heavy minutes, and with a little bit of a usage bump and production bump, like he's another one where I'm going to be kind of looking to plug him in.
Yeah, I had some stats in the article, but it's something like let me see. Actually, I can pull it up real quick. They are allowing Memphis. They're allowing opponents to shoot 48% from the floor and 45.5% from three. That's shooting guards, I should say, over the last 10 games. So you would expect him to be able to get hot from the floor. I'm just plugging him in and playing him. It's just such a great spot for him. Rondo's interesting. I think he has some upside here, but he's not a guy that I'm forcing into my lineups here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind using him. I'm not really looking to chase the big game, but we've seen his numbers be somewhat decent with Davis off. But overall, like he's not a guy that I'm looking to kind of get a lot of exposure to.
Yeah, not I'm not like I said, I'm not really forcing him into my lineups. But if you want some GPP exposure, go for it.
Yeah. You interested in any of the fill-ins here for Davis?
I'm actually looking right now. I seem to remember Dante Cunningham being really good without Anthony Davis this season. I'm pulling it up right now. Yeah, 22.1 fantasy points per game without Anthony Davis, 11.6 with Anthony Davis. Obviously, a lot of that comes from him just playing more minutes, 27.3 compared to 22. Value is not easy to come by tonight. So, again, not a great spot, but if you want to, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, he played 25 minutes last time out against Memphis and put up 23 DK points, so it's not bad.
Yeah, no, I mean he's a guy. He almost had a double double in that game, so he's a guy you could consider for pretty cheap.
On the Memphis side, it's basically been a two-man show here. But I think New Orleans, given the fact that they're just a putrid defense, like I don't mind taking some shots elsewhere.
Yeah, I think you're obviously starting with Tyreek Evans. Poured in 20 or more points 11 times in his last 14 games. It is a revenge game for him. So there is that. I think he's a guy, if you're getting heavy exposure to the New Orleans side of this game, you want to get some exposure to him. So I don't mind going there. Gasol's extremely interesting. You know the minutes are going to be there for him, assuming he stays out of foul trouble. He should be able to put up a solid outing here against a weak New Orleans front court.
Yeah. And obviously, I believe Andrew Harrison probable for tonight's game. He was questionable last game, but he's fine. We've seen basically just him and Chalmers kind of splitting minutes here, and just a lot of kind of random guys getting run at the three.
Yeah, the guys like you're getting Harrison, you're getting Selden, you're getting Chalmers, all these other guys, wing players in here that are just eating into each other's minutes. I don't have any interest in any of them.
Yeah. Interesting, like Green or Martin here.
No, not really.
Moving on here, OKC, Minnesota, a game that we've had a 3-game sample size already this year for fantasy points and what's happened. So, that's always kind of fun to deal with and see with Westbrook averaging over 50 fantasy points in 3 games against Minnesota. How likely are you to use him tonight, just given the fact that there are a ton of options?
I because the way that I build my lineups for tournaments, I won't have anyone over 10K anyways, but he would be a guy that I would actually consider in tournaments given the other chalky options. Cash games, again, you're probably going with Cousins over Westbrook here, but uh, you do have to consider the usage rate for Westbrook recently has been insane, coming off almost had another triple double against Portland, over 60 fantasy points in three straight outings, averaging 52 and a half per game against against Minnesota. I mean, it's a great spot for him. If you wanted to get some exposure to him, if you wanted to pay up for a stud that may have a little bit lower ownership, I think Westbrook is a fine option.
Paul George here. I mean, he's played really well against Minnesota. I mean, he's averaged 48 fantasy points in 3 games. Tough matchup here. I mean, Minnesota has been good against small forwards. They're fifth in defensive efficiency over the last 10 games. They haven't allowed a ton of fantasy points. I'm a little nervous here for Paul George. I think it's a little bit more because we saw LeBron really struggle last time out too.
Yeah, I guess it depends on if like Thibodeau really wants to throw Jimmy Butler out there to try to lock him down, or if he wants to try to slide him over to Westbrook, or however they want to align defensively. If you want to take a shot on him in GPPs, go for it. You're not using him in cash. Um, I think the cash game exposure to this game is Steven Adams, who's just absolutely like he's dominated. He's dominated in this matchup. Three games, 32.6 minutes, 38.3 fantasy points, shooting 81% from the floor, and 3 games against Minnesota, 21.3 points per game, 9 rebounds. He's the guy that you're probably getting exposure to in cash games.
He's missed 6 shots against Minnesota in 3 games this year.
Yeah, that's just insane.
Like, I mean, we like targeting, centers against Minnesota, and really like targeting Steven Adams this year.
Yeah, I love Steven Adams this year. I mean, I was all over him last year too, and I got burned by it most nights. But this year he's just been insane, and shooting has been ridiculous. Last 2 games, shot 75% from the floor against Portland, 81% against Phoenix. Great spot for him. Cat does not play defense at all. I don't really see anyone slowing him down tonight.
Yeah, and I think on FanDuel, I mean, he's the perfect mid-range guy. He's only 6,300. Really, once you get lower past Adams, it really is only kind of Biyombo and Cantor for me. Like you mentioned, Kyle Quinn, who's a reasonable GPP option. Like he's just the guy I think on FanDuel that I'm going to be plugging in a ton of.
Yeah, if you're looking for a cheaper guy, he's your option unless you're going down to like Robin Lopez or somewhere down there.
Yep. Melo for me on this slate, I'm looking other directions.
Yeah, I'm not looking at Melo, and I'm definitely not looking at any of these filler options like the Fergusons and all that stuff that we talked about yesterday. Still not going there.
Yep. As far as the Minnesota side, this is weird. I mean, I don't know how much I like Minnesota here tonight. Like I find myself kind of going other directions because it seems like there's always 1 or 2 guys that are right in the same price range in better spots.
Yeah, I think you're definitely looking at Butler averaging about 40 fantasy points per game against Minnesota or against Oklahoma City this season. He's fine. He's a good option given Andre Roberson being out. Wiggins, if you want to take a shot on him, go for it. Obviously, with Jeff Teague probably coming back for this game, that's going to change things a little bit. It's basically Butler and maybe a sprinkle of Towns in tournaments.
Yeah, I mean Towns has played pretty well. He's averaged 27 and 13 against them this year, but just Drummond, Jokic, Howard, all these guys like right in that range. Like there's other cheaper options with just as much upside.
Yeah.
So. So in Minnesota, kind of a secondary option tonight's slate.
Yeah, just Butler. Butler's probably your safest option, and then Towns and tournaments, and that's pretty much it.
Yep. Orlando and Milwaukee here. Milwaukee favored by 10.5, 220 over under. I have a little bit of concern here as far as blowouts, and I don't usually do, but I could also see Milwaukee just blowing the doors open here off Orlando on the back-to-back traveling. Orlando just. But it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday.
And we do know, actually, our listeners may not know, but Orlando is 5-5 this season on Wednesdays compared to 7-24 on all other days. So you never know. It's Wacky Wednesday. You never know what could happen.
Let's before you click the thumbs down on YouTube, we're just messing around. Let's talk about this Orlando side. We saw Alfred Payton struggle last night. I kind of like Orlando here in a contrarian way because like I want to get some pieces to Milwaukee, and if this game has a potential to just be a shootout and it can stay close, like I don't think a lot of people will look at Orlando.
Yeah, you mentioned Elf struggled last night. Vogel kind of put him back on the shelf, only played him 23 minutes. You can thumbs down that comment if you want to on YouTube. But I do expect a bounce back spot here. We know Milwaukee has struggled recently against point guards, 29th in defensive efficiency over the last 10. I do kind of like taking a shot on him. His price has fallen just a little bit. So I don't mind going there. The other guys, though, like Aaron Gordon, Evan Fournier, I'm not terribly intrigued by either one of those guys. It's basically Alfred in tournaments. You're not using him in cash games. I don't think you can ever use Alfred in cash games. And then maybe some Biombo, just because we know Milwaukee does really struggle against big men.
Yeah, I think those are the two, and because they're kind of priced right, like they'd fit in with if I was using a Giannis and I was trying to kind of get a little correlation game stack going. But yeah, I mean, I don't mind Biombo. Like you said, I mean, Milwaukee's just a team that does struggle. Bottom three in defensive efficiency. They're 26 in rebounding. Biombo's a guy who can grab a ton of boards, has some block shot ability as well here.
Yeah, he does. And I mean, even last night, like he only played 22 minutes, still had 8 rebounds in 22 minutes, only 6 points, had a block and assist. I mean, again, he didn't play very many minutes. Vogel kind of rode with the most Spates and some of these other guys that were kind of keep trying to keep that game close. So I don't know that that happens again tonight. So I'm not chasing the most Spates, 30 fantasy point game and things like that. Mario Hazonia played a decent amount of minutes last night too. I think some of that was related to Jonathan Simmons playing limited minutes. I don't know that I want to chase any of that either. So, like I said, it's Bismack and Alfred in tournaments, and that's pretty much it.
Yep. And on the Milwaukee side, I mean, everyone's pretty much in a good spot here. One of the higher totals on the night, there obviously is the blowout concern, which for me doesn't mean too much with Giannis because if the blowout's happening, it's because of Giannis. I think it kind of hurts a little bit here if like Bledsoe and Middleton kind of don't meet what you want from them.
Yeah, I definitely do like Giannis a significant amount here, coming off a game against Indiana where he was not good. He only put up 34 fantasy points, shot 37% from the floor. I do like him a lot here. Obviously, we talked about some other stars that are probably going to be a little bit higher owned. You would expect him to come in and be a little bit lower owned. Orlando 30th in defensive efficiency against small forwards over the last 10 games. We saw LeBron just demolish them last time out. I think he put up like 70 fantasy points or something like that. I do have a lot of interest in him here. I like Eric Bledsoe. I think it's a good bounce back spot for him. And I like Malcolm Brogdon, who's still really cheap. His price did go up a little bit on DraftKings, but he's up to 5K. Again, you expect him to still be in the starting lineup, playing a ton of minutes, extra shot attempts, and against a team like Orlando that's really really bad, he could notch some of those steals as well. So I like Malcolm Brogdon as a mid-range cash option with some upside here.
Brogdon is a guy who, if I would take on a mortgage and put it down that he was going to get 25 fantasy points, like he just seemingly just will fall into the range of 24 to 26 fantasy points on a nightly basis. And like you said, like he does have the upside in the spot.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a couple games with like right around 30 fantasy points, and I know that's not like slate breaking or tournament winning upside, but that's still a solid return on his 5K salary. So he's a guy, again, you just plug him in your lineup and you feel comfortable that he's going to return at least a solid value for you.
Yeah. Decent spot here for John Henson, but I think I'm just kind of done.
I would use him on DraftKings if he still had power forward eligibility. Um, FanDuel, he's interesting because of that power forward eligibility. I do have more interest over there because he is only 5,400. It is a good spot, a good matchup. We know he's volatile, so it's kind of tough to trust him, but he does have upside. I mean, we've seen it 40 fantasy points, 37 fantasy points over the last couple, last I think 6, 7 games. So he has upside here. I think he's a good option. I don't hate going there in cash or tournaments.
Yep, we kind of glossed over Middleton here. I'm not really looking at him tonight. I think there's other options in that range that I'm kind of going with. He's cooled off a little bit. I mean, he's averaging right around 30 fantasy points over his last five, but at that price, I feel I can get higher upside and get a little bit more here.
Yeah, he probably can. I think you're looking at him more along the lines of just a solid minutes floor at his price. So you could actually see him put up a solid outing. Orlando does struggle to defend isolation. They struggle to defend spot up shooters as well. A couple areas where Middleton does kind of excel. So you could see him putting up a solid game, but I feel more comfortable using him in cash games just because you're locking in a decent amount of minutes.
And he's 8K over on FanDuel.
Yeah, it's kind of insane.
Yeah, that's a little too expensive. You have Tyreek Evans, who's 300 more. We have, Drew Holiday, who's much cheaper. All these guys. So
Yeah.
DK, I don't mind it. FanDuel's priced out of consideration for me.
Yeah, same here.
Portland and Houston next. Portland on the back-to-back. Do need to keep an eye on Lillard, who's just been all over the place in terms of injury news. We do need to mention that there is a significant price difference between Shabazz Napier and on FanDuel and DraftKings. I don't know what happened. There was a wrong. Something happened.
Yeah, someone's getting fired for that one. Shabazz Napier on FanDuel, 4,200. He's over 6K on DraftKings. I think he's still cash viable, even though he is going up against Chris Paul. Um, on DraftKings, he's cash viable at that price. On FanDuel, you're definitely looking at him in cash in tournaments. Given he's only 4,200, he's going to have massive ownership, so you can expect that. Should we see Damian Lillard sit this game out, he's probably out, questionably, maybe. I don't know what to do with his status. So we just kind of have to wait and see what they say. But if Damian Lillard sits, Shabazz Napier, you're just locking him in on FanDuel.
Yeah, and as far as everyone else from this game, I called it a decent game last night. I was kind of off of him there. It's a decent spot for him here. Like the field goal attempts are going to be there. He's shot over 20, or he's averaging over 20 in last 5 games. I don't hate it, but I'm kind of still looking at other directions.
Yeah, 40 fantasy points in 3 straight games. If Lillard sits this game out, go for it. I wouldn't talk anyone off of using him. Um, I don't. I really don't have that much interest in this game outside of Napier and on FanDuel. The rest of this game is just really not that intriguing to me. Everyone is kind of just appropriately priced where I'd rather look other places.
Yeah, I don't hate Aminu here at 4,500. Like he could fill a spot if he's kind of like your last guy that you need to plug in. It's not a great spot for him, but they put up 20 fantasy points against Houston last time out, which I'll take at 4,500.
Yeah, that's fine. He's the guy you would expect him to get some extra run in this matchup, so he's a decent option. Other than that, though, like Nurkic's usage is insane without Lillard. If you wanted to take a shot in tournaments, you could. Houston, an excellent rebounding team, though, so that does concern me a little bit.
Yeah, it does, and we've seen his peripheral stats be pretty solid of late, but 7,200. Like I think DK is where I take the shot on Nurkic.
Yeah, same here.
So, on the Houston side of things, I kind of feel like everyone's a little bit here too expensive for my liking. Although Chris Paul came down a little bit in price, I don't mind it, but like they're not my favorite options in this slate, even though it's Houston.
Yeah, they're really not like options that I'm even really looking at here. Like Chris Paul at his price, there's better guys that I'd rather pay up a little bit more for Westbrook or pay down for Kimba and some of these other guys. But if you wanted to go for it, I mean, both him and Gordon over 30% usage without Harden, they're fine options. Gordon, I think, has a little more upside given his price, but even at that price, it's still kind of high. But if you wanted to use him, go for it. I think Gerald Green's the interesting option here on FanDuel only given his price because he's like 4,200 on FanDuel or something like that. So 4,500. So I think he's the guy that I'd look at the most here from the Houston side of things, and that's on pretty much FanDuel only.
Yep, same here. And I'm just kind of off the front court with this Houston team. I'm not really interested in Capella, Riza, or kind of anyone filling in Anderson.
Ariza has been really good recently, but I'm not chasing the 43 fantasy point outing again.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that.
Atlanta, Denver. This is obviously one that I have a lot of interest on this Denver side mostly, but starting with Atlanta running a lot of kind of guys in the rotation here. We've seen some guys play pretty well, like in somewhat limited minutes. A lot of these guys are kind of interesting GPP options because they're price tags and because they have some decent upside, like Bazemore, Prince, Schroeder, even Ilyasova. Like all these guys have some decent upside for the price.
Yeah, I feel like they're all pretty much appropriately priced. No one's standing out as like an excellent value. Schroeder's fine. If you want to go that route, he's really struggled on the road recently, and this is, I think, the 5th straight road game for this team. I do like Prince a little bit, given his price. You could see him play some extra minutes, but they're just running out so many bodies like right now. Like John Collins was absolutely smashing, and he only played like 8 minutes last game, so it's really tough to trust him. I think you're looking at Prince and Ilyasova as two guys that you can probably use in cash games. Their minutes feel a little more secure. Other than that, like everyone else is just tournament plays for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Denver side things, great spot for them here at home against this Atlanta defense. We can kind of start with Jokic here, who's coming off a monster game in another good spot, played well against Atlanta earlier this year. As kind of expected, they've just been a team that target centers against all year. This is a spot where he can just rack up the upside, and he's still kind of a little bit cheaper than some of the other center options that we've already talked about.
Yeah, I have absolutely no issue building around Jokic here. We're coming off a huge game against Golden State. He put up a triple double. I think I saw was it his first one of the season, I believe. Um, yeah, I think it's the first one of the season. But again, massive upside here against an Atlanta team. Struggles to rebound, struggles to defend in the paint. Obviously, Dwayne Dedman is back, and he is okay on defense. He's not great, so that might eat into a little bit of his upside here. But last time out, I mean, 8 of 16 from the floor, 15 rebounds, 18 points against this Atlanta team. 47 fantasy points. I have no issue going with Jokic here. Safe cash game option, and we know he has plenty of tournament winning upside.
Yep, definitely. And then really, I mean, there's another trio here where I feel really comfortable using. Well, two of the three I feel comfortable using them. Gary Harris, Jamal Murray, Trey Lyles, all averaging over 30 fantasy points in their last five. The minutes have been there for all three of them. Murray still obviously worries me a little bit just because, if he doesn't play well, like we've seen him get taken out. But I don't think that's going to be the case once again tonight here. And they don't really have a lot of depth at right now.
No, I wrote him up in the tournament in the GPP article. He scored 20 plus points with at least 6 rebounds in 4 of his past 7 games. Leads the team in scoring. He's a decent spot up shooter, and that's an area where the Hawks really struggle to defend. I think this is an excellent spot to target him. Probably just a little bit too cheap for the upside he has. Gary Harris, excellent option as well. I think Trey Lyles is a guy that I'm still building my lineups around. I know his price is starting to climb up there, but production has been solid. Ownership still just doesn't seem to be gravitating towards him. So he's a guy that I absolutely love. Like if I was to rank it, I would probably rank it Jokic, Lyles, Murray, and then Harris, and then maybe some Wilson Chandler as well. But Lyles, absolutely love him, and then Jokic and Harris or Murray are all great options.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned Chandler. Like, he's still cheap. He played 38 minutes last game. Like, he is just still playing a ton of minutes. Hasn't been a great fantasy points per minute player. He has had a couple of duds of late, but we've also seen him, I mean, kind of be a little bit split. Like, he's been above 25 fantasy points in 6 of the last 10 games. Like, it's not bad for him at 4,500.
Yeah, no, he's a fine option. Not a ton of upside, so he doesn't have tournament upside, so that would make him in theory a better cash game option. But he's a very volatile cash game option, so you're not comfortable locking him in your cash game lineups. But he's a guy that can get you right around that 25, 26 fantasy points.
Yeah, and Barton, it's been kind of just Harris for me over Barton. I like Barton the other night, and he's been kind of slipping down a little bit.
Yeah, it's one of those things. If Murray is struggling, you'll see Barton come in and take over some of the point guard role, and then that's when he kind of excels. If you want to take a shot on him in tournaments, go for it.
Clippers and Golden State. It's pretty nice that they're going to save the slaughtering until the end of the night here.
Yeah, I just everyone is expecting this game to be a massive blowout. I have this weird feeling that it stays closer than people expect, but I still don't know that I'm going to have that much exposure to it.
It's with Durant back. I mean, obviously Curry, like 10-8 is just a hard price for me to pay with Curry with Durant back. Draymond Green's 8,400. Like, that's pretty expensive. I know he's been great of late, but I don't know. I just don't see enough of the value here, even though it's a great spot.
I still want some exposure to Curry, even if Durant comes back, just because I don't know what it is about the Clippers, but Curry just loves beating the hell out of women. I know some of these games have come with Durant. I'm sure some of them haven't. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but over the last 3 seasons, obviously some of those are without Durant because he wasn't on the team 3 seasons ago, but 48.8, 66.8, 46.3, 53, 45.5, 66.8, 56.3, 60.3, 55.3, and 66 fantasy points. That's insane. That's he's averaging like 60 fantasy points in under 30 minutes against this team this season. So like Curry's still probably gonna go bananas against him. If you want to use him, go for it. I think he's an excellent guy that you can get exposure to tonight, especially in tournaments. Like you could use him. He's 10-8. You could like use him, and if he gets you that 60 fantasy points, and you're just gonna be like climbing up the leaderboards because everyone else faded this game.
Yeah, that is true. As far as anyone else though, like Durant 9.5, not really in play for me here tonight. Green, I love Draymond Green, but 8.4 is a little pricey for me.
Yeah, I kind of like Durant a little bit. That price is a little too cheap in this matchup. I think he's fine. Again, as tournament only, like you're not looking at him in cash games. I don't. That price is up there on Draymond coming off a couple solid outings without Durant. I don't really want to look there either.
The value's kind of off the board now here with Golden State kind of fully healthy now.
Yeah, it really is. Now, if for some reason Durant sits, which I think is probable, again, that term means absolutely nothing in NBA DFS right now. But if he does sit out, you could look at some of the value options. But as of right now, they're all out of play.
On the Clippers side, you going with anyone here?
I would probably take a shot on Tyrone Wallace again, still really cheap, especially if this game blows out. You would expect to see him get some extra run. That's assuming Milos is out, which that news has not come out yet. Um, just kind of have to wait and see on that one. Blake Griffin not expected to play. So yeah, it's maybe some Juwan Evans and Tyrone Wallace, and that's probably it.
Yeah, I'm not going with the Lou Williams train here tonight. He's a little too pricey. I don't see him really kind of paying off that price tag in consideration to many of the shooting guards that we talked about, the Tyreek Evans, the Drew Holidays of the world here.
Yeah, you really need the game to stay close for him to pay off that price tag, and recent history tells us the game will not stay close. Again, anything could happen. So if you want to take a shot in tournaments, building 150 lineups, you want to get a couple lineups with Lou Williams in it, go for it. Same goes for DeAndre Jordan. Um, Last time out against his team, played 24 minutes, had 33 fantasy points. We know the ceiling is there for him. So again, in tournaments, if you want to get some exposure in a bunch of lineups, go for it. But none of these guys are cash game viable.
Let's do highest score here. Let's go below 8K.
Highest score below 8K.
Oh, how convenient. Kemba Walker, 7,900.
I'm looking at that right now. I think I'm gonna go with Chris Dunn though.
Ah, damn it! Come on.
Oh, and Miles Turner will miss tonight's game against Miami and Friday's game against Cleveland.
There you go.
I did that because I knew that's where you were going. By the way,
yeah, the one day you don't let me go first here.
I learned my lesson yesterday.
This would be a Super Bowl call, but Tobias Harris, I guess, at 6,900.
There we go.
He's got to outscore some people, but you know what? I'll go with it.
I like it.
So that's it for us. You can go to davefantasycafe.com. Check out Brent's GPP article for tonight's slate, cheat sheets, optimizer as well, and we'll be back on Friday.
Good luck.